Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fact Check Simplified. Today, we're talking about that time when corporate wellness culture and employee surveillance had a baby. And that baby was an absolute monster that tracked your bathroom breaks. Think of it as the world's worst startup pitch meeting, where the big idea is to quantify your humanity for a quarterly report, gone completely global. We're going to try and untangle this whole productivity theater mess without getting lost in corporate jargon, which is basically my promise to you that I'll only say synergy ironically before the inevitable corporate betrayal starts. If you enjoy this highly dramatic but fun version of modern facts, please hit that like and subscribe button. Seriously, it helps us pay the electric bill for our overpriced standing desks. All right, grab an iced latte. Things are about to get unnecessarily infuriating. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a press release so polished, so full of optimistic buzzwords, it could bring a tear to a venture capitalist's eye. The company was called Innovate Solutions, a name so generic it's practically camouflage. You've seen this company 1,000 times before. Their headquarters is probably 90% glass. Their logo is a single, soothing geometric shape, and their CEO has a TED Talk about disrupting human potential. They existed in that weird corporate ether where businesses don't sell products. They sell solutions, ecosystems, and paradigms. Innovate Solutions wasn't just a company. It was a movement. Or so their marketing department claimed, probably in a team-building email sent at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and their flagship product, the one that was going to change everything. It was called Synergiza Pro. Even the name sounded like it was designed by a committee of marketing interns fueled by cold brew and desperation. Synergiza Pro wasn't just another app. Oh no, that would be far too simple. It was pitched as a fully integrated, AI-driven, holistic workflow optimization platform. It was the digital messiah sent to deliver us from the evils of inefficient meetings, cluttered inboxes, and the mortal sin of an unoptimized minute. It promised to be your calendar, your chat app, your project manager, and your digital best friend all rolled into one sleek, minimalist interface. It wasn't software, it was a partner. The public pitch was flawless. Imagine a world with no more toggling between a dozen different tabs, no more asking, "Did you get my email?" because Synergiza Pro's intelligent communication hub already knew. It would learn your work habits, anticipate your needs, and gently nudge you toward peak performance. Their launch video featured attractive, diverse actors laughing while pointing at a clean, beautiful dashboard, looking not like they were at work, but like they were at a day spa for their careers. The tagline was something breathtakingly ambitious like, "Work where you are, be who you can be." It was less a software pitch and more a spiritual manifesto. And right there, for anyone paying attention, was the first, giant, flaming red flag. When a tech company starts talking about your soul, it's usually because they want to own a piece of it. The language was intentionally soft and aspirational. They used words like empowerment, visibility, and alignment. What they really meant was monitoring, surveillance, and control. Visibility wasn't for you to see your projects more clearly. It was for your boss to see you more clearly. Alignment wasn't about teamwork. It was about ensuring every single employee was marching to the exact same digital drumbeat with zero room for deviation. Let's break down the core unspoken transaction here, cause the modern corporate world has a pathological obsession with data. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and if you can't manage it, you can't squeeze every last drop of quantifiable output from it. Knowledge work, which is messy and creative, and happens in bursts, is notoriously hard to measure. Effect. Innovate Solutions created Synergiza Pro, a beautiful Trojan horse that promised to finally put a number on everything. It offered to translate the chaotic art of office work into the clean, simple language of charts and graphs. Consequence. In doing so, they built a tool perfectly designed for corporate surveillance. Packaged as a gift of efficiency, they weren't selling productivity. They were selling certainty to anxious executives. The promise was that this software could finally tell them, once and for all, if their employees were actually working. The software's marketing materials were a masterclass in this deception. They boasted that early adopters of Synergiza Pro saw a 47% increase in cross-departmental synergy. What does that even mean? How do you measure synergy? Did they hook employees up to a machine that detects collaborative brainwaves? Of course not. It was a meaningless, impressive-sounding statistic designed to short-circuit critical thinking. It was a number that made managers feel smart and decisive for buying the product. The whole thing was built on a foundation of feel-good nonsense. And so, the stage was set. Innovate Solutions had created the perfect product for its time, a digital overlord disguised as a personal assistant, it was a tool that promised to help employees, while its true purpose was to watch them. It was a beautiful, user-friendly panopticon, and it was about to be rolled out to thousands of unsuspecting office workers who thought they were just getting a new way to manage their to-do lists. They had no idea they were about to become the star players in the largest, most infuriating season of productivity theater the world had ever seen. The software was installed, the servers were humming, and the benevolent digital eye of Synergiza Pro was about to open. So, while the public got the warm and fuzzy Be Your Best Self marketing campaign, the C-suite got a completely different show. This wasn't a pitch about empowerment, it was a pitch about power. It happened in sterile, air-conditioned boardrooms, rooms where the only color came from the glowing bar charts on a massive screen. This was where the real magic and the real money happened. The sales team at Innovate Solutions didn't sell a philosophy to these people, they sold a weapon. A very, very profitable weapon against the executive's greatest fear, wasted payroll. Picture the scene, a sales executive from Innovate, let's call him Chad, is clicking through a PowerPoint presentation so slick it could probably slide right off the screen. Every slide is loaded with corporate catnip. There are hockey stick graphs showing exponential growth in productivity units. There are complex-looking diagrams illustrating workflow friction reduction, and most importantly, there are big, beautiful numbers projecting an insane return on investment. The presentation wasn't about the employee experience. It was about turning a workforce into a predictable, optimizable asset. Just like a fleet of delivery trucks or a server farm, humans were now the resource bottleneck, and Synergiza Pro was the solution Chad would never use. The word surveillance, that's a messy, ugly word that invites lawyers and ethics committees. Instead, he used a curated lexicon of MBA-approved euphemisms. He talked about gaining actionable insights. He spoke of unlocking visibility into team dynamics. He promised data-driven coaching opportunities. It sounded like they were buying a high-tech business school, not a digital panopticon. He'd point to a dashboard on the screen, a mesmerizing mosaic of real-time data. Imagine, he'd say, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, being able to see, at a glance, which of your teams are in a state of flow and which are hitting roadblocks before it impacts your quarterly numbers. To a room full of executives haunted by the specter of remote work and the nagging suspicion that their employees were just watching The Office all day, this was irresistible. It was the God view. For years, management had been a guessing game. They managed by proxy, by results, by the vague sense they got in a weekly check-in. Synergiza Pro promised to replace all that messy human intuition with the cold, hard certainty of data. It offered to make the invisible visible. It promised to tell them not just what was done, but how it was done, second by second. This is the core of the sell, the part that makes it also insidious. Cause executives, especially in large, distributed companies, feel a terrifying loss of control. They are accountable for the productivity of hundreds or thousands of people they can't physically see. This anxiety is a powerful motivator. Effect, a salesperson presents a tool that visualizes work. It shows little green dots when people are active and red dots when they are idle. It turns the abstract concept of work into a simple, color-coded dashboard that a 5-year-old could understand. Consequence, the executives, absolutely mesmerized by this illusion of control and omniscience, see the software not as a tool for their employees, but as a tool for them. They authorize the 6- or 7-figure expenditure without a second thought. Because they aren't buying software, they're buying peace of mind. The truly invasive features were never on the first slide. The keystroke logging, the screen captures, the analysis of how long someone's mouse sat still, those were buried deep in the presentation. Labeled as Advanced Analytics Suite, or the Granular Productivity Module, Chad would gloss over them quickly. And for our power users, he'd say with a confident smile, we offer the ability to drill down into individual performance metrics, to identify coaching opportunities. It was framed as a benevolent diagnostic tool, like an MRI for workflow. How could you argue with that? It was for the employee's own good, to help them grow. The executives nodded along, their minds already calculating the cost savings. They imagined trimming the fat, identifying the low performers, and optimizing resource allocation. They saw the dashboard not as a window into their employees' souls, but as a sophisticated control panel for their human machinery. The profound hypocrisy, of course, was that none of them would ever dream of subjecting their own workdays to this kind of scrutiny. Their own jobs filled with long lunches, strategic thinking, and vague meetings could never be measured in clicks per minute. This was a tool for the people in the digital trenches, not for the generals planning the war from their corner offices, so the deal was signed. The contracts were faxed. Chad hit his quarterly target and probably earned a ridiculously oversized commission check. The executives leaned back in their ergonomic chairs, feeling savvy, modern, and in control. They had just made a bold, data-driven decision to future-proof their company. They had purchased the ultimate management tool, down on the floors below. The employees were still blissfully unaware. They were busy doing their jobs, collaborating, solving problems, and occasionally taking 5 minutes to stare out the window and think. They had no idea that their every click, their every pause, and their every keystroke was about to become a data point on a graph in a boardroom they'd never be invited into. The Kool-Aid had been served, and the leadership team had drunk every last drop. After the ink dried on the 7-figure contract, and the executives had finished congratulating themselves on their forward-thinking genius, the next phase began, deploying the digital Trojan horse. To the masses, this couldn't be done with a memo about improving oversight. That would be met with riots, or at the very least, a catastrophic number of resumes being updated on LinkedIn. No, this required a delicate touch. It required the corporate equivalent of sneaking vegetables into a toddler's mac and cheese. It required an ominously cheerful, company-wide email. The email arrived on a Monday morning, precisely at 9:05 a.m., when everyone was at their most vulnerable, still processing the trauma of their alarm clock. The subject line was a work of art in manipulative positivity. Big news. Get ready to supercharge your synergy with Synergiza Pro. The double rocket ship emoji was a masterstroke. It screamed fun startup culture while masking an operation with the emotional subtlety of a high-security prison. The email, probably ghostwritten by a team of HR and internal communication specialists, was a symphony of upbeat nonsense. It began, "Hi team, get ready for a game changer. As part of our ongoing commitment to innovation and empowering you to do your absolute best work, we are thrilled to announce that we will be transitioning to our new all-in-one collaboration platform, Synergiza Pro. Starting next week." It was drenched in exclamation points, so many exclamation points, you could practically hear the forced smile of the person who typed it. The body of the email was even better. It was a carefully curated list of employee-facing benefits. It promised a single source of truth to end confusion, a seamless, integrated chat to replace the clunky old one, a dynamic task tracking system to make projects feel less like work and more like an exciting adventure. It read like an ad for a new video game, not a mandatory piece of corporate software. There was, of course, a deafening silence on the features that had actually closed the deal in the boardroom. Not a single word about analytics, metrics, performance dashboards, or data collection. That was all conveniently left out of the brochure. Let's do a quick translation of the corporate speak, shall we? A single source of truth actually meant a single, unassailable log of your every action that can and will be used against you in your performance review. Enhanced transparency across teams meant your boss's boss, and a random guy in HR can now read your project chats in real time. And my personal favorite, helping you unlock your full potential, was a thinly veiled threat that meant we will now quantitatively measure your potential, and you are currently not meeting it. The rollout plan was described as a fun, week-long journey, complete with Synergiza Pro champions, just regular employees bribed with a gift card to be enthusiastic, and mandatory lunch and learn sessions. The sessions, of course, would be painfully superficial. They'd show you how to change your profile picture, how to react to a message with a thumbs-up emoji, and how to create a to-do list. They would never, ever, under any circumstances, show you the terrifying, all-seeing dashboard that management would be using every single day. The reaction from the employees was, predictably, a mixed bag. The majority, probably about 80%, greeted the news with a resigned sigh. It was just another top-down mandate. Another piece of software they'd have to learn before it was inevitably replaced by something else in 18 months. They skimmed the email, archived it, and went back to their actual work. Another 10%, the eternal optimists, were genuinely excited. They saw the promise of a cleaner interface and fewer emails and thought, finally, maybe this will actually help. But then there was the last 10%, the cynics, the veterans of a dozen corporate rollouts. Their internal alarms started blaring the moment they saw the subject line. They knew that the level of forced enthusiasm in a corporate email is always directly proportional to how bad the news actually is. They reread the email, squinting at phrases like holistic visibility and data-driven workflows. They didn't know exactly what was coming, but they knew it wasn't a better emoji picker. They were the canaries in the digital coal mine, and they were starting to feel a little lightheaded. This, right here, is the critical moment of deception. Cause, the company needs universal adoption for the surveillance to be effective, but they can't be honest about the software's true purpose. Effect, they market it internally as a cheerful, employee-centric productivity tool, focusing exclusively on its most benign features. Consequence, the vast majority of the workforce willingly installs the program on their computers. They click I agree on the terms and conditions without reading them. The digital gates are thrown wide open, not by force, but by a very friendly, emoji-filled invitation. By the end of the week, the rollout was complete. The friendly little Synergiza Pro logo now sat on thousands of desktops and taskbars, glowing softly to most. It was just another icon, a minor annoyance, a promise of efficiency they secretly doubted would ever materialize. They had no idea that behind that soothing geometric shape, a silent, tireless algorithm was already beginning its work. It was logging in, connecting to the servers, and starting to count. Every click, every message, every single second of every single day, the party was just getting started. For the first 2 weeks, Synergiza Pro was just there. It was the corporate equivalent of new furniture in the break room, slightly awkward, a bit unnecessary, but mostly harmless. People learned the new chat commands, grumbled about the notification settings, and slowly migrated their project boards over. The Synergiza Pro champions walked around offering unwanted tips, and the mandatory training sessions were a distant, boring memory. An uneasy peace settled over the office. This, of course, was the calm before the storm. The software wasn't just settling in, it was calibrating. The first sign that something was deeply wrong came without warning. It was a Tuesday afternoon. An accountant named Brenda was staring blankly at a spreadsheet, deep in thought, when a small, gray notification box materialized in the corner of her screen. It said, "Screenshot captured for workflow diagnostics," and then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Brenda blinked. She looked around. Did anyone else see that? Was that normal? It felt deeply, fundamentally not normal. It felt like walking into your kitchen to find a stranger taking notes on your choice of breakfast cereal. Unsettling, but so fast and weird that she convinced herself she must have misread it. But then it happened again, to someone in marketing, and then to a programmer on the 3rd floor. Whispers started moving through the company's old chat system, the one they were supposed to stop using. "Hey, did you guys see a weird pop-up from Synergiza Pro? The screenshot one. Yeah. I thought I was hallucinating." A low-grade, collective paranoia began to fester. It was the birth of the digital ghost in the machine, a ghost that apparently had a penchant for photography. Soon, other quirks started to appear. People noticed their mouse freezing for a split second at random intervals, almost as if the system was taking a snapshot of its position. A fleeting notification that read sensing activity logged to cloud would flash for a millisecond before disappearing. These weren't overt acts of surveillance. They were subtle, creepy little reminders that something was running in the background, something that was watching. It was like hearing a floorboard creak in an empty house. You can't prove anything is there, but you're suddenly very aware that you might not be alone. The confusion escalated when the first automated weekly summary emails went out. The subject line was, naturally, aggressively cheerful. "You rocked it. Here's your weekly Synergiza Pro snapshot." The email was full of gamified metrics and corporate cheerleading. "You sent 147 chat messages. Way to collaborate. You spent 29 hours in a focused state. Incredible." But nestled among the ego-boosting stats were some other data points. A pie chart showed a breakdown of time allocation by application. It listed, down to the minute, how much time you spent in Microsoft Excel in your email client. And most terrifyingly, in Google Chrome. This was the first piece of hard evidence. The first moment where the plausible deniability started to crumble. Cause, the software's core monitoring features, having finished their silent calibration phase, were now fully active. Effect, these features manifested as unsettling glitches, random screenshots, activity log notifications, and detailed weekly reports sent directly to the employees. Consequence, the workforce's initial resignation towards the new software curdled into active suspicion and paranoia. When they reached out to IT for answers, they were met with carefully scripted deflections. Of course, someone filed a ticket with IT. The response they received was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. The IT department, either deliberately kept in the dark or acting under strict orders, responded with a copy-pasted, infuriatingly vague explanation. "Thank you for your ticket," the reply began. "The notification you're referencing is a no-nui bug in the current version of Synergiza Pro. Their engineers are working on a patch. The weekly snapshot is an opt-out feature designed to help you self-assess your productivity. Habits. You can disable it in your settings. A bug. They called it a bug. Capturing a screenshot of your private work and announcing it was a bug. The summary of your every digital move was a helpful, opt-out feature. This was brilliant in its own evil way. It didn't deny the action, but it completely reframed the intent. It told the employees, "You are not being watched. The software is just a little broken." It made anyone who pushed back seem like a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Are you really going to complain to HR about a user interface bug? But the active window report in that email was the detail no one could shake. It was one thing to know the company wanted you to be productive. It was another thing entirely to get a receipt at the end of the week, detailing exactly how much time you spent on ESPN.com versus your actual work. The ghost was no longer just making noises. It was leaving notes. It was showing people that it knew what they were doing. The software wasn't a tool they were using. It was a silent, meticulous accountant logging their every digital breath, and the weekly summary was its invoice. The era of plausible deniability was over. Something was very, very wrong with Synergiza Pro. Just as the whispers about screenshot bugs and activity tracking emails were reaching a fever pitch, Innovate Solutions made its next move, and it was a stroke of diabolical genius. A lesser company might have issued a clarification or an apology. Innovate Solutions, however, understood the modern corporate landscape. They knew that the best way to distract from a fire is to set a much bigger, more dazzling fire right next to it. They didn't retreat, they doubled down, cloaking their next offensive in the unassailable armor of corporate wellness. A new company-wide email landed. This one was even more cloying than the last. The subject line read, "It's time to thrive." Introducing the new Synergiza Pro Wellness Hub. The yoga emoji was the key. It was a signal. This wasn't about work anymore. This was about you. The email was a masterpiece of compassionate-sounding jargon. It spoke of the company's deep commitment to employee well-being and the importance of preventing burnout in a fast-paced digital world. It announced, with breathless excitement, a brand new, free-of-charge feature, the Wellness Hub. The Hub was pitched as your personal, AI-powered wellness coach. Built right into the Synergiza Pro platform, it was here to help you find that ever-elusive work-life balance. It wasn't a tool for your boss, it was a gift for you. The announcement video showed an actress looking stressed, then taking a deep breath and clicking on a beautifully designed dashboard with calming blue and green tones. The dashboard was filled with charts and gauges tracking metrics that sounded vaguely scientific, but were completely meaningless. Things like focus stamina, cognitive load index, and collaboration rhythm. According to the pitch, the Wellness Hub would analyze your unique work patterns and provide gentle, personalized nudges. "It looks like your focus stamina is dipping," a friendly pop-up might say. "Why not take a 5-minute mindful break?" Or, "Your email activity is high after 7 p.m. Remember to protect your personal time." It was presented as a caring, digital friend who just wanted you to be happy and healthy. It was the corporate equivalent of a parent who says, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed," while simultaneously going through your search history. And this is where the strategy transcended mere surveillance and entered the realm of high art. Cause, the company recognized that productivity was a cold, unlikable justification for monitoring. Employees were suspicious of a tool designed to make them work harder. Effect, they pivoted, laundering their data collection through the warm, fuzzy, and utterly unimpeachable language of wellness. They were no longer tracking your work. They were safeguarding your health. Consequence, this masterstroke of branding made it almost impossible to object. If you questioned the Wellness Hub, you weren't a privacy advocate. You were someone who was against mental health. You were anti-work-life balance. It was a rhetorical checkmate. Let's be clear, this had nothing to do with wellness. It was a data laundering scheme. The glitches and bugs from before, the screenshots, the activity logs, the active window tracking, those were now rebranded as the essential data points needed to power the Wellness Hub's benevolent algorithm. Your every click, every pause, every frantic flurry of typing was now a vital sign, a key indicator of your digital well-being. The surveillance wasn't a secret, shameful feature anymore. It was the heroic data-gathering engine of your salvation from burnout. HR departments across the company wept with joy. They finally had an answer to the rising tide of burnout complaints that was to work less or pay more. They could launch a proactive, data-driven wellness initiative. They could present impressive-looking charts at board meetings, showing aggregated cognitive load trends. They were no longer the company police. They were corporate healers. The worst part was the intentional vagueness. No one ever explained what focus stamina was actually measuring. Was it the amount of time you spent in one application without switching? Was it the speed of your typing? Was it the absence of social media tabs in your browser? Nobody knew. And the company certainly wasn't telling. This ambiguity was a feature, not a bug. It created a black box of data collection, allowing Innovate Solutions to monitor literally anything they wanted and file it under the catch, all heading of Wellness Analytics. So, the Wellness Hub went live. It appeared as a new tab in the Synergiza Pro interface. Complete with a calming leaf icon, it had a clean design, inspiring stock photos of people doing yoga on mountains, and a dashboard that gamified your mental health. Employees clicked on it, half out of curiosity, half out of a morbid sense of dread. And there it was, a personalized report card on their ability to work well. The digital ghost was no longer hiding in the walls. It had put on a lab coat, clipped on a name badge that said Dr. Synergiza Pro, and was now offering you a seat on its therapy couch, all while taking very, very detailed notes, while the HR department was busy congratulating itself on the compassionate genius of the Wellness Hub. Another, far less friendly feature was quietly activated. If the Wellness Hub was the velvet glove, this was the iron fist. It was a new tab on the Synergiza Pro dashboard, visible not just to you, but to your manager and in some cases, your entire team. It was called the Productivity Pulse. There were no calming leaf icons here, just hard lines, sharp angles, and a single, terrifying number, your productivity score. This wasn't some vague, feel-good metric like focus stamina. The productivity score was brutally, primitively simple. The algorithm, in its infinite wisdom, had decided to measure the complex, nuanced act of 21st century knowledge work using a handful of metrics that would have felt outdated in a 1950s typing pool. The score was a weighted average of 3 key actions, keystrokes per minute, mouse clicks per hour, and total mouse distance traveled across the screen. That was it. That was the sum of your professional worth, updated in real time for all to see. The effect was instantaneous. It was like dropping a single drop of scorpion venom into the office fish tank. The entire ecosystem went insane overnight. The quiet hum of thoughtful work was replaced by a frantic, percussive cacophony. The age of the keyboard gladiator had begun. Work was no longer about solving a client's problem, writing elegant code, or crafting a brilliant marketing strategy. Work was now about feeding the beast. It was about making sure your productivity score, displayed on a team-wide leaderboard like a high score in an arcade game, never dipped into the dreaded yellow or red zones. A new, unspoken set of rules emerged. Rule number 1, never stop moving. Employees who needed to think, to read, to simply contemplate a problem were now punished. The programmer staring at a complex function, the designer visualizing a new layout, the writer trying to find the perfect word. Their scores would plummet. They were, according to the infallible logic of Synergiza Pro, slacking off. The system could not distinguish between deep thought and a daydream. It was all just a lack of keyboard and mouse input, and it was all treated as a crime against productivity. This gave rise to a whole new category of labor, performative work, the art of looking incredibly busy for the algorithm while achieving absolutely nothing. Cause, the software required a simple, easily quantifiable set of metrics to generate its productivity score and demonstrate its value to management. Effect, it defaulted to the most primitive inputs available, keyboard and mouse activity, and gamified them with a real-time score and public leaderboards. Consequence, the nature of work itself was fundamentally corrupted. Employees were incentivized to perform frantic, often meaningless, digital actions. A culture of productivity theater was born, where the appearance of being busy became more important than actual accomplishment. You'd see the most absurd behaviors. People would open a blank text document and just start typing. Some typed out the lyrics to songs, others just repeatedly hammered the same keys, creating pages of gibberish. The goal wasn't to write anything meaningful. It was to keep the keystroke per minute metric in the green. The office began to sound like it was populated by 1,000,000 woodpeckers on amphetamines. Mouse movement became a nervous tick for the entire company. If you were on a phone call or watching a training video, you had to be constantly, neurotically wiggling your mouse in little circles on the screen. Leaving it still for more than a minute felt like a mortal sin. People developed elaborate, looping mouse wiggling patterns to execute while their brains were otherwise engaged. It was a silent, frantic dance performed for an audience of one, the algorithm. The keyboard gladiators, those who were naturally fast typists or worked in data entry, were suddenly the heroes of the office. Their names were always at the top of the leaderboard, shining in glorious gold. They were held up as paragons of productivity, even if their actual output was mediocre. Meanwhile, the company's most brilliant, Thoughtful strategists, the quiet ones, were now at the bottom of the list. Their names shamefully displayed in red, and the managers. They were now forced to be the algorithm's enforcers in weekly check-ins. They had to address the data. Frank, your mouse travel was down 20% this week. Let's talk about how we can get those numbers back up. It was a conversation so utterly divorced from meaningful work that it felt like a scene from a surrealist play. Good managers hated it, but their own performance was now being judged on their team's aggregate productivity pulse. They were all trapped in the same dumb game. The office had been transformed. It was no longer a place of collaboration and innovation. It was an arena, a noisy, high-anxiety theater, where everyone was performing the act of being productive for a cold, unblinking digital judge. The goal was no longer to win for the company, it was to beat the machine. The rise of the keyboard gladiators created a noisy, performative, and deeply inefficient workplace. But for the architects of Synergism Pro and the executives who paid for it, the data revealed a new problem. Even with the frantic typing and clicking, there were still moments of stillness, gaps, pauses, 3-minute intervals where a user's cursor sat motionless. To a manager staring at a dashboard, these gaps weren't moments of deep thought or concentration. They were black holes of lost productivity. They were evidence of time theft. The solution: the system needed to stop just passively scoring and start actively prodding. Enter the unblinking eye of an activity. It was a feature rolled out in an update described as a tool to help you maintain focus and stay in the flow. In reality, it was a digital cattle prod. The mechanism was brutally simple. If your computer registered no keyboard or mouse input for exactly 180 seconds, the software would assume you had ceased to be a productive unit. It would then take action. A large, patronizing pop-up would hijack the center of your screen. It didn't matter if you were reading a crucial report, on a video call, or in the middle of a complex thought. The pop-up would appear, dimming the rest of the screen, and ask in a cheerful, condescending font, "Are you still there?" Below the question, a timer would start a 30-second countdown next to a single, bright green button that said, "Yes, I'm back to work." The public humiliation was the key feature. If you failed to click that button within 30 seconds, your status on every single Synergism Pro interface, the team chat, the project board, the company directory would instantly flip from a healthy green active to a shameful, lazy-looking yellow idle. Your name became a beacon of unproductivity for all your colleagues and, more importantly, your manager to see. It was the digital equivalent of having a supervisor walk up to your desk and loudly ask if you were taking an unauthorized nap. The psychological impact was devastating. The 180-second timer became a silent, ticking clock in the back of everyone's mind. The freedom to simply think was obliterated. 3 minutes is nothing. It's the time it takes to read a long email. It's the time it takes to explain a concept to a colleague sitting next to you. It's the time it takes to stare at a line of code and find the bug. All of these essential, value-creating activities were now reclassified as idleness by the unblinking eye of the algorithm. The performative behaviors that had started with the productivity score now became an essential survival mechanism. The neurotic mouse wiggling was no longer about climbing a leaderboard. It was about preventing the pop-up of shame from appearing at all. Cause management, obsessed with eliminating any unmonitored downtime, demanded a feature that would actively police employee engagement on a minute-by-minute basis. Effect: Synergism Pro deployed an aggressive inactivity timer that publicly shamed any employee who paused their physical computer interactions for more than 3 minutes. Consequence: this completely shattered the possibility of deep focus. A pervasive, low-grade anxiety took over the workforce, forcing everyone into a state of perpetual, neurotic screen wiggling just to appease the timer and avoid public flagging. Picture this: Brenda from accounting is on a crucial call with a major client. The client is explaining a complex problem with their invoice. Brenda is listening intently, giving her full concentration to the human on the other end of the line. Her hands are still. Her mouse is motionless. 2 minutes pass. Then, at the 180-second mark, the pop-up appears, covering the very spreadsheet she needs to be looking at. "Are you still there?" It chirps. She now has a choice. Awkwardly interrupt the client, "Excuse me for 1 second. My computer thinks I've died," to click the button. Or let her status flip to idle and face questions from her manager. Later, this was the new reality. The software wasn't just measuring work. It was actively interrupting it. It was a system designed by people who fundamentally misunderstood or simply did not care that productivity is not a constant, unbroken stream of physical motion. It was a system that valued the appearance of labor over the execution of it. The office became a sea of perpetual screen wigglers. Every employee, from the most junior hire to the senior vice presidents, was now tethered to their machine. Tap the spacebar. Nudge the mouse. Tap a shift key. Nudge the mouse. This became the subconscious rhythm of the workday. It was a constant, low-level physical assurance to the digital overlord that you were, in fact, still in your chair, still engaged, still a good and productive worker bee. The trust between the company and its employees wasn't just broken. It had been atomized and replaced by a tyrannical pop-up box. The unblinking eye wasn't just watching anymore, it was poking you endlessly. The tyranny of the inactivity timer had created a workforce of perpetually twitching screen wigglers. But even the most sophisticated algorithm had a blind spot: the physical world. Synergies a pro knew when you weren't at your desk, but it didn't know why. Was it a productive hallway conversation, a coffee break, a trip to the bathroom? To the data-obsessed minds at Innovate Solutions, this uncategorized time was a maddening void in their otherwise perfect dataset. It was an inefficiency that needed to be named, measured, and, of course, optimized. The solution began, as always, with a seemingly innocuous new feature. When an employee returned to their computer after it had been locked or idle for more than a few minutes, a new, friendly pop-up would greet them. "Welcome back." It would say, "To help keep your activity timeline accurate, please select the reason for your break." Below was a drop-down menu with a few options: lunch, scheduled meeting, personal appointment, and the one that seemed almost like an afterthought: break. Most employees saw it as another layer of bureaucratic nonsense. They'd just click break and move on. What they didn't know was that in the background, the software was meticulously logging the duration. It started a timer the second your computer went idle and stopped it the second you logged back in. And every time you selected break for an absence of, say, 4 to 7 minutes, the algorithm made a quiet, confident assumption. It tagged that time block with an invisible, internal label: bio break. This was happening silently for weeks. A vast, secret repository of data was being compiled on the bathroom habits of the entire company. But it remained a secret. It was just another set of numbers in a server, invisible to the employees and only accessible to high-level administrators, until someone decided to pull back the curtain. The leak didn't come from a heroic whistleblower in a dark garage. It came from a mid-level manager who was so flabbergasted by what he saw on his new advanced team analytics dashboard that he took a screenshot with his phone and sent it to a trusted colleague. That colleague sent it to Timur within an hour. It had infected the entire company's nervous system. The screenshot was of a report, a simple, sterile-looking chart, but its title was a perfect distillation of everything wrong with modern corporate culture. It read, Quarterly Bio Break Optimization Report. The outrage was not just in the title, but in the columns below it. There it was, in cold, hard Arial font, a list of employee names. Next to each name were several columns of data: average bio break duration minutes, daily bio break frequency, and the most soul-crushing metric of all, total weekly productivity hours lost to bio breaks. Your most private, basic human needs, quantified, aggregated, and framed as a direct financial loss to the company. A KPI for your bladder. This was the moment. This was the point of no return. Cause, in its relentless quest to quantify every second of the workday, the company began tracking and categorizing all off-screen time, including bathroom breaks. Effect: a manager-level report was created to analyze this data, framing bathroom breaks as a productivity loss that needed to be optimized. Consequence: a leaked screenshot of this bio break optimization report spread virally throughout the company, transforming the employees' background anxiety and resentment into a focused, unified, and incandescent rage. The thin veneer of wellness and productivity was incinerated on the spot. The term bio break was a particularly cruel piece of euphemistic nonsense. It's a word designed to strip a natural human function of its humanity, turning it into a sterile, mechanical process that can be analyzed on a spreadsheet. And optimization, what, precisely, was there to optimize? Were employees now expected to attend workshops on increasing their efficiency in the restroom? Would they get a memo from HR suggesting they try to align their bio breaks for maximum team synergy? The implications were as absurd as they were horrifying. The reaction was a chemical explosion. The low-grade paranoia of the screenshot bug, the performative anxiety of the productivity score, the neurotic twitching from the inactivity timer, all of it had been building pressure. This leak was the spark. The old, unsanctioned chat channels lit up with a fury that the company had never anticipated. People weren't just angry about being spied on. They were angry about being dehumanized. They were being treated not as people, but as miscalibrated, inefficient machines that spent far too much company time on biological maintenance. The screenshot was a perfect piece of evidence. It was undeniable. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't a feature you could opt out of. It was a high-level report, created intentionally for the express purpose of scrutinizing the bathroom habits of the workforce. The mask wasn't just off, it had been shattered into a million pieces. The benevolent, caring facade of Synergies Pro, with its wellness hubs and empowerment rhetoric, was revealed for what it truly was: the most invasive, petty, and insulting micromanagement tool ever conceived. The employees were finally united, and they were furious. The leaked screenshot of the bio break optimization report was not a spark, it was a detonation. The company's internal servers practically groaned under the weight of the furious back-channel chatter. Leadership, who had been admiring their data-driven kingdom from on high, suddenly realized the peasants were at the gates with digital pitchforks. A response was needed. Immediately. Not a memo, not an email. This required a face. A human face to deliver an inhuman message. So, an emergency. All hands, cameras optional virtual town hall was called for 3 o'clock that afternoon. The CEO, a man whose job was literally to lead, was conspicuously absent. So was the CTO, the person who actually built the digital guillotine. Instead, the company sent in the ultimate corporate shield, the head of human resources. Let's call her Pat. Pat's job was to absorb anger for a living, and today was her Super Bowl. The meeting began in a chilling silence. Hundreds of employees were logged on. A sea of black squares and default avatars. No friendly chatter, no pre-meeting banter. Just the cold, dead air of a workforce waiting for an execution or an apology. Pat appeared on screen, seated in a meticulously curated office with a thriving fiddle leaf fig in the background. She smiled a pained, practiced smile, the kind you see on people who are about to tell you that your flight has been canceled. "Hi everyone," she began, her voice radiating a forced calm. "Thank you for joining on such short notice. I know there's been a lot of conversation today, and I want to address it head on. We've heard your concerns around some of the analytics features in Synergies Pro, and I'm here today to provide some clarity and, frankly, to clear up a significant misunderstanding." She never said the words leak screenshot. She never said bathroom breaks. It was always analytics features and misunderstandings, and then she made the pivot. The move so audacious, so breathtakingly cynical, it would go down in the annals of corporate gaslighting. She connected the bathroom report directly to the wellness hub. The data that has been circulating, Pat said, her face a mask of earnest concern, is not, and was never intended to be, a productivity metric. I want to be crystal clear about that. This data is a core component of our proactive wellness initiatives, a collective. Silent scream went through the hundreds of muted laptops. She continued, "We know that burnout is a serious issue, and the research shows that changes in an employee's daily rhythms are often the earliest warning signs. For example, if our wellness analytics notice an employee is taking an unusually high number of short breaks, it can be an indicator of high stress levels or an inability to focus. It's a red flag that someone might be struggling." She paused for dramatic effect. Conversely, she went on, if an employee is taking almost no breaks at all, it can mean they are overworked and overwhelmed, and not taking the necessary time to care for themselves. By understanding these patterns, we can proactively and confidentially reach out, through HR, to offer support and resources before an employee reaches a crisis point. We aren't tracking your productivity, we are trying to track your well-being. This was the masterstroke, a lie so perfect it was almost beautiful. Cause, facing a full-scale mutiny over the dehumanizing surveillance. The company had to concoct an unassailable justification for its actions. Effect, HR delivered a speech, claiming the bathroom break data was a compassionate tool used to detect early signs of employee burnout, reframing the surveillance as a heroic act of preventative health care. Consequence, this lie was so transparently manipulative that it backfired catastrophically. Instead of quelling the rebellion, it insulted the intelligence of every single employee, destroying the last vestiges of trust and transforming their anger into a cold, hard resolve. The sheer, galaxy-brained audacity of it was stunning. They were spying on their employees' bathroom habits and calling it healthcare. They had taken a system of control and repackaged it as an act of radical empathy. Any deviation from the norm, too many breaks to few breaks, was now a symptom of a psychological problem that only the company, with its all-seeing eye, could diagnose. It was a flawless, circular logic from which there was no escape. While Pat spoke, the private chats were a raging torrent of pure, unadulterated sarcasm and fury. "Oh, so my bladder is a key indicator of my mental health. Got it. Can't wait for HR to offer me resources because I drank too much coffee. This isn't gaslighting. It's a full-blown gas explosion. The meeting ended without a real Q&A, of course. Pat took a few pre-screened softball questions and then signed off with another pained smile and a chipper. I hope this clears things up. Remember, we're all in this together. The screen went black. The meeting was over, and the company had just made the single biggest mistake in its history. They thought their employees were stupid. They had looked their entire workforce in the eye and delivered a lie so insulting, so condescending, that it unified everyone from the cynics to the optimists against them. The fire wasn't out. The entire company was now soaked in gasoline, just waiting for a match. Pat's disastrous town hall was meant to be a fire extinguisher instead. It was a gallon of jet fuel. The condescending, manipulative lie about proactive wellness didn't just fail to pacify the workforce. It radicalized them. The low-level grumbling and clandestine chats morphed into a silent, coordinated insurgency. The employees had been pushed, prodded, and gaslighted into a corner, and now they were about to push back. All it took was one person with a secure email account and nothing left to lose. That evening, an anonymous employee, let's call them E, sat down at their personal computer. E had been with the company for 8 years. E had believed in the mission, but the bio-break optimization report, followed by Pat's insulting performance, had severed that loyalty completely. E compiled everything: the pristine, high-resolution screenshot of the bathroom report, the ominously cheerful rollout emails, a detailed, first-hand account of the inactivity timer and the productivity score, and a few anonymized, enraged quotes from colleagues. E packaged it all neatly, wrote a simple subject line: receipts from inside a surveillance company, and sent it to a journalist at a major tech publication known for its sharp, skeptical coverage of the industry. The email landed in the inbox of a reporter named Maya, a journalist who had built her career on exposing the rotten core of tech utopianism. For Maya, this email was not just a tip, it was a symphony. It had everything: a villainous, hypocritical corporation, a perfect, damning piece of evidence in the screenshot, and a universally relatable story of human dignity being crushed by an algorithm. She worked through the night, verifying the details, getting more context from me, and crafting the narrative. She knew this wasn't just another story about bad software. This was a story about the soul of the modern workplace. The article dropped the next morning at 8 a.m. sharp. The headline was a masterpiece of viral lethality: the productivity theater. Leaked report shows tech firm Innovate Solutions timed employee bathroom breaks for wellness. The internet, as it is prone to do, went absolutely feral. The story was an atom bomb. Within the first hour, it was on the front page of every tech aggregator. By noon, it was the top story on Reddit's r technology and r anti-work subreddits. By 3 o'clock, Innovate Solutions and the hashtag productivity theater were trending globally on Twitter. The screenshot of the bio-break report became an instant, iconic meme. It was photoshopped into historical documents. It was compared to scenes from dystopian movies. People started posting pictures of their own bathrooms with captions like, "Just optimizing my bio-break. Hope my boss approves of my KPI." The public reaction was a tidal wave of cathartic rage and dark humor. It resonated so deeply because it wasn't just about one bad company. It was about a feeling that millions of people shared: the sense that their jobs were becoming increasingly invasive, metrics-obsessed, and dehumanizing. Innovate Solutions wasn't an outlier. They were just the ones who got caught. Cause, a furious employee, completely alienated by HR's gaslighting, decided to bypass internal channels and leak the entire story to a prominent tech journalist. Effect: the journalist published a meticulously detailed, explosive article with a killer headline, exposing the company as practices to the entire world and giving the scandal its official name, the Great Productivity Theater. Consequence: the story went viral on an unprecedented scale, turning the company's private PR crisis into a very public, global humiliation. The narrative was no longer in their control. It belonged to the internet. This was the company's worst nightmare. For a business obsessed with internal data and control, they were now being defined by a single, catastrophic, and completely uncontrolled data leak. The narrative they had so carefully crafted of wellness, synergy, and empowerment was obliterated. The new narrative, written by Maya and amplified by millions, was one of petty tyranny, digital surveillance, and breathtaking corporate hypocrisy. Inside the glass and steel headquarters of Innovate Solutions, it was pure chaos. The PR department's phones were ringing off the hook with calls from every major news outlet in the world. The company's stock, which had been a darling of the market, began to tremble. The executives who had toasted their brilliant investment in Synergies Pro were now in a windowless boardroom, staring at their own company's name trending next to poop emojis and memes about dystopian surveillance. They could control their employees' pop-ups. They could control their internal messaging. They could even try to gaslight them in a town hall. But they could not control the internet. The receipt was out there. The story was public. And the world was laughing at them, horrified by them, and sharing the hell out of the story of the great productivity theater. The show was just getting started, and the whole world was now in the audience, with their company name being dragged through the digital mud, and their stock price starting to look a little seasick. The executives at Innovate Solutions did what all cornered corporate animals do. They called in the lawyers and the public relations gurus in a room probably powered by panic and lukewarm coffee. They huddled together to craft their response. The goal was simple: stop the bleeding. The strategy, however, was complex. They couldn't admit fault, as that would invite lawsuits. They couldn't stay silent, as that would look like guilt. They had to thread the needle. They had to perform the delicate, cynical art of the corporate non-apology. After hours of agonizing over every comma and strategically deploying every buzzword in their arsenal, they released their official statement. It was posted on their company blog and pushed out to their social media channels. A digital white flag reeking of desperation. The statement was a marvel of emptiness, a black hole of accountability. It began, as these things always do, with a lie about their own character. At Innovate Solutions, our mission has always been to build tools that empower people and foster positive, transparent workplace cultures. We believe deeply in trust and in supporting the holistic well-being of our partners and their employees. It was the equivalent of a bank robber beginning his testimony by talking about his passion for community banking. Then, it addressed the global firestorm they had created with the gentle, dismissive language one might use to describe a minor kerfuffle. We are aware of the recent online conversation surrounding our Synergies Pro platform. It read, "Conversation. Not scathing expose, not global humiliation, but a gentle conversation." As if the internet were a friendly book club discussing their latest product. And then came the apology itself, the rotten core of the whole rotten statement. We have always believed our work is in service of employee wellness, but we recognize that the intent of some of our features has been misunderstood. We sincerely apologize for any concern or distress this misinterpretation has caused. Let's pause and admire the sheer craftsmanship of that sentence. They weren't sorry for tracking bathroom breaks. They were sorry that you, in your simple-mindedness, had misinterpreted their 5-dimensional wellness strategy. The problem wasn't their actions. It was your perception. It was a verbal sleight of hand designed to sound like an apology, while placing the blame squarely back on the public. The statement, of course, then doubled down on the very same gaslighting that had caused the leak in the first place. The company, facing an out-of-control public relations disaster, needed to issue a statement that appeared apologetic without admitting any legal or ethical fault. Effect, their PR team drafted and released a textbook corporate non-apology, a masterpiece of buzzword-laden prose that apologized for the public's misunderstanding, while aggressively defending the company's noble wellness intentions. Consequence, the public, already primed for corporate insincerity, immediately identified the statement as a cowardly and insulting piece of spin. It was mercilessly mocked and dissected online, further cementing the company's reputation as arrogant and deceitful, and intensifying the backlash. Here's a quick translation of the rest of their PR speak. What they said: the analytics tools in question were designed as part of a proactive, data-driven initiative to help companies identify early indicators of employee burnout. What they meant: we were sticking with the S for your health line because our lawyers told us. It is the only one that is immediately incriminating. What they said: we are committed to innovating responsibly and leading the industry in creating human-centric productivity solutions. What they meant: please stop associating our name with the phrase dystopian bathroom surveillance. What they said: in light of the feedback, we are immediately launching a comprehensive internal review of these features. We are listening, we are learning, and we are dedicated to evolving. What they meant: we are forming a committee that will meet 3 times and then do absolutely nothing until people stop tweeting about this. The internet's response was swift and brutal. The statement was ratioed into another dimension. Tech journalists wrote follow-up articles not about the scandal, but about the anatomy of the terrible non-apology. Online commentators created bingo cards of the corporate buzzwords used in the statement. The phrase "we apologize for the misinterpretation" became a meme overnight, used to sarcastically apologize for everything and nothing. Innovate Solutions had tried to douse the PR fire with a bucket of linguistic sludge, but all they managed to do was make the smoke thicker and more toxic. They had a choice between humility and arrogance, and they chose arrogance wrapped in the language of concern. They confirmed everyone's worst suspicions. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were just sorry they got caught. The statement, intended to be a shield, had become another weapon for the public to use against them. The corporate non-apology was intended to be the final word on the matter, a linguistic tranquilizer dart aimed at the heart of the rebellion. But the employees of Innovate Solutions didn't feel tranquilized. They felt insulted, they felt enraged, and now they felt organized. The company had made it clear that internal channels were useless, that their concerns were just misinterpretations. So, the resistance moved underground, or rather, it moved to Reddit. Someone created a subreddit. Its name was simple, direct, and cathartic. R. Total Synergy. The name was a joke, a sarcastic appropriation of the company's favorite buzzword. Within 48 hours, it had thousands of anonymous members. To join, you had to privately message the moderators with some small, obscure piece of internal company knowledge to prove you were an employee. It was a digital speakeasy for the revolution, and it was glorious. The subreddit became the company's shadow headquarters, a place where the actual culture of Innovate Solutions now lived. It served three crucial purposes. First, it was a group therapy session. People shared their most absurd Synergism Pro stories. The programmer, who got a low activity warning while on a call with his dying grandmother. The designer, who was flagged for being idle while sketching on a physical notepad. Sharing these stories stripped the software of its power and transformed individual anxiety into collective strength. Second, it was a world-class meme factory. The anger and frustration were channeled into brilliant, biting humor. There were memes of Pat from HR's the Kamala Ali of corporate doublespeak. The bio break optimization report was photoshopped into the US Constitution. The condescending "Are you still there?" pop-up was reimagined as a needy, clingy ex-boyfriend. This wasn't just about laughs, it was a way of reclaiming the narrative. By ridiculing their digital tormentor, they shrunk it down to size. But the third, and most important, function of our Total Synergy was that it became a crowdsourced, open-source laboratory for psychological and technological warfare against Synergism Pro. This wasn't just a place to complain, it was a place to act. A thread titled "How to Beat the Beast," a compendium of anti-surveillance tech, was pinned to the top of the subreddit, and it became the most important document in the entire company. The advice was practical and devastatingly effective. Cause, the official corporate statement was so insulting and dismissive that it drove employees to create their own anonymous, unsanctioned forum to air their grievances and organize a response. Effect, an employee-only subreddit was born, and it quickly evolved from a place for venting and memes into a highly effective, crowdsourced hub for developing and sharing concrete strategies to sabotage Synergism Pro's monitoring capabilities. Consequence, the resistance became technically proficient. Employees, armed with shared knowledge, began systematically undermining the surveillance system using tools like mouse jigglers and scripts, rendering the multi-million-dollar data analytics platform effectively useless. The most popular recommendation was the hardware mouse jiggler. These were small, cheap USB devices that looked like a thumb drive. You plug it in, and it physically moves your cursor 1 pixel back and forth every few seconds. To the unblinking eye of Synergism Pro, it looked like constant, uninterrupted activity. The subreddit had links, discount codes, and heated debates over the best models. The effect was immediate. Within a week, every single model of mouse jiggler on Amazon was sold out. There was a genuine, global shortage, driven almost entirely by the enraged employees of a single tech company. For those on company laptops where a strange USB device might be noticed by IT, the subreddit offered software solutions. Users shared simple, elegant Python and PowerShell scripts. One popular script, nicknamed the coffee break, would automatically open a blank notepad file, type a single character, wait 3 seconds, delete the character, and then repeat the process indefinitely. It was the perfect simulation of a person doing something. It generated just enough keyboard and mouse activity to defeat the inactivity timer and keep your productivity score in the healthy green. The resistance was beautiful in its simplicity. It was 1,000 tiny acts of digital sabotage. The data that was now flowing into the executive dashboards was completely meaningless. The charts that were supposed to show a perfectly optimized workforce now showed a workforce of robots who never slept, never paused, and never went to the bathroom. The managers were looking at graphs that measured not the productivity of their team, but the flawless operation of several thousand mouse jigglers and notepad typing scripts. The employees had done what their leadership could not. They had created synergy. They were a perfectly aligned, highly motivated team, working together to solve a complex problem. The problem, of course, was their own company software, right under the noses of the executives who thought they had achieved total visibility. An invisible, anonymous, and hilarious rebellion was winning. The successful mouse jiggler rebellion had created a palpable sense of victory among the employees. For the first time since the rollout of Synergiza Pro, they felt a flicker of power. The data being fed to management was garbage, a beautiful, useless stream of digital noise. But the more technical minds within the Total Synergy Resistance knew that defeating the activity trackers was only winning a single battle. What else was this digital parasite doing on their computers? Emboldened by their success, they decided to go hunting. A small, anonymous group of software engineers and network security specialists within the company formed a secret audit team. They began to carefully dissect Synergiza Pro, not from the user interface, but from the inside out. They used network sniffers and packet analyzers, tools designed to watch the raw data flowing from their computers back to the Innovate Solutions servers. They wanted to see exactly what the software was reporting home. After a few late nights of sifting through encrypted gibberish, one of the engineers found something, a new, undocumented type of data packet being sent out every time someone typed a message in the Synergiza Pro chat. The engineer, posting under the anonymous username Packet Sleuth, dropped a bombshell on the subreddit. The title of the post was simple and terrifying. It's worse, they're reading our chats and grading them. Packet Sleuth had managed to decrypt a portion of the data payload. It contained the full text of the employees' chat messages, but it also contained something else, a small, appended block of code that included a sentiment score. Every message was being run through a sentiment analysis algorithm and assigned a numerical value, likely on a scale from 1 very negative to +1 very positive. Your private, one-on-one, and team-based conversations were being read, analyzed, and graded for their emotional content. The subreddit went into a collective shock. This was a new and terrifying frontier. The activity tracking, as invasive as it was at least monitoring their actions. This was monitoring their attitudes. Packet Sleuth did more digging and found evidence that this sentiment score fed into another hidden, management-level metric, a metric that was likely called something like a team morale index or an employee positivity rating. You weren't just being scored on your productivity anymore. You were being scored on your personality. The implications were chilling. In a quest for ever deeper analytics, the creators of Synergiza Pro embedded a sentiment analysis engine to quantify the emotional tone of all employee communications. Effect, a technically skilled member of the employee resistance discovered this hidden feature by analyzing the software's network traffic, revealing that all chats were being secretly read and scored for positivity. Consequence, the nature of the surveillance was revealed to be not just behavioral but psychological. This forced employees into a state of profound self-censorship, where they had to perform a relentlessly positive emotional state in all written communication, effectively destroying honest feedback and authentic collaboration. Suddenly, every casual chat message was a high-stakes performance, expressing frustration about a buggy piece of software. That's a negative, Frank. Your positivity score just dropped. Using dry sarcasm to blow off steam with a colleague. The algorithm does not compute sarcasm. Negative score, pointing out a legitimate flaw in a manager's plan. Warning, dissent detected, deploying negative sentiment score. The ideal employee, according to this new, hidden metric, was not a critical thinker or a problem solver. The ideal employee was a mindless, endlessly cheerful sycophant. A human golden retriever who communicates exclusively in exclamation points, smiley face emojis, and pre-approved positive keywords. Great question, Brenda. I'm so excited to synergize on this amazing opportunity. Let's crush it. That sentence would probably get you a perfect +1. A sentence like, "This deadline is unrealistic and we need to push back," would get you flagged as a disgruntled, negative influence. This was the weaponization of toxic positivity. It was a system designed to enforce a monoculture of performative happiness. It created a workplace where it was algorithmically unsafe to voice concern, to debate, or to be anything less than 100% thrilled with every single corporate decision. It was a tool for manufacturing consent on a massive scale. The news ripped through the Total Synergy community, and the mood shifted from triumphant rebellion to a cold, Orwellian dread. The mouse jigglers could fool the activity trackers. But how do you fool a machine that's reading your mind? The resistance had to adapt, and fast. New threads appeared on the subreddit. A guide to algorithm-friendly language, lists of power words to boost your sentiment score, how to rephrase legitimate criticism to sound like a fun suggestion. The company chat system, already a place of low-grade paranoia, became a ghost town of genuine interaction. It was now a stage. Every message was carefully crafted, stripped of nuance, and injected with a lethal dose of corporate-approved cheer. People were no longer talking to each other, they were talking to the algorithm. They were faking their work with mouse jigglers. And now they were faking their feelings with smiley faces. The digital prison had just added a new, invisible wing, a wing that monitored your soul. The mouse jiggler rebellion was a brilliant tactical victory for the employees. But the strategic war was still being fought in the court of public opinion. And Innovate Solutions, having failed spectacularly with both their gaslighting HR meeting and their insincere non-apology, decided it was time to stop playing nice. The PR team was benched. The lawyers were sent in. Their new strategy was simple. This was no longer a matter of opinion or ethics. It was a matter of contract law. The company's general counsel, a man who probably had a framed picture of a shark in his office, released a new, formal statement. This one wasn't posted to the company blog with a calming stock photo. It was a press release, a cold, sharp-edged document that reeked of billable hours. It was a legal warning shot fired at the entire world. The statement was a masterwork of corporate condescension. It expressed disappointment that the robust features of their platform were being misrepresented in the media. It spoke of their unwavering commitment to legal and ethical compliance. And then it delivered the killing blow. The company's lawyer smugly announced that every single feature of Synergiza Pro, the keystroke, logging the inactivity timer, the screenshotting, the chat scanning, and yes, even the data collection that fueled the bio break report was 100% legal, permissible, and explicitly agreed to by every single employee. Where was this supposed agreement? It was buried, of course, deep within the Mariana Trench of modern legal documents, the end-user license agreement, the EULA, that 90-page wall of impenetrable text that every employee had clicked "I agree" on during the Synergiza Pro installation, because the only other option was "I do not agree and therefore cannot do my job." The lawyers, with a flourish of triumph, pointed to the specific clause, page 74, section 11, Data Analytics and Service Improvement, subsection C. It read, "By installing and using the software, user hereby grants to the company a perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, royalty-free license to collect, process, aggregate, and analyze telemetry data. For the purposes of this agreement, telemetry data includes, but is not limited to, user input metrics such as keyboard and mouse activity patterns, application usage data, including active and inactive window states, workflow patterns and inter-application data flows, and temporal data related to user session continuity, and interruptions for the exclusive purposes of generating performance analytics resource, optimization reports, and holistic employee wellness assessments." Let's translate that from legalese into English, shall we? Cause, facing a potential firestorm of lawsuits and regulatory scrutiny, the company's legal department executed a defensive maneuver to assert the legality of their actions. Effect, they issued a formal statement pointing to a dense, all-encompassing clause buried deep within the mandatory and user license agreement, which they claimed constituted explicit user consent for all forms of their surveillance. Consequence, this EULA defense was a PR catastrophe. It was seen by the public and employees as a predatory and cowardly gotcha tactic, highlighting the coercive nature of workplace consent and turning the company into a poster child for unethical terms of service agreements. Temporal data related to user session continuity and interruptions was their $5 phrase for timing your bathroom breaks. Holistic employee wellness assessments was their cover for analyzing your chats for happy thoughts. User input metrics was their polite way of saying we count every single time you tap the spacebar. It was all there. They had legally covered every last one of their sins in a document they knew for a fact that not a single human being had ever actually read. The tone of the statement was one of pure, unadulterated smugness. It was the ultimate "we have you on a technicality." It was a message to the employees: you consented, you clicked the button, we own your data, what are you going to do, sue us? Read the fine print. It was a message to the public: we are legally untouchable. In the court of public opinion, however, this defense was like trying to put out a fire with a leaking oil tanker. Privacy advocates, tech ethicists, and labor lawyers had an absolute field day. They held up Innovate Solutions as the perfect example of coerced consent. Is it really consent when the alternative is unemployment? Can you meaningfully agree to something that is written in a language designed to be unreadable? The company's legal shield became a moral bullseye. For the employees huddling in the total synergy subreddit, the news was both infuriating and clarifying. It was infuriating because it confirmed the company's utter lack of a moral compass. But it was clarifying because it told them that fighting this battle through official channels was a fool's errand. They were legally trapped. The company had a 90-page, lawyer-approved document to justify its tyranny. The employees had their wits, their anonymity, and a worldwide shortage of mouse jigglers. The legal battle may have been lost before it began, but the guerrilla war in the digital trenches had just become more important than ever. The legal defense, while perhaps reassuring to the company's shareholders, was a public relations apocalypse. Innovate Solutions was now legally correct and morally repulsive. The board of directors, seeing their company's brand image being set on fire, decided on a last-ditch, high-risk maneuver. They needed to change the narrative, and to do that, they needed to deploy their ultimate weapon, the visionary. It was time for the CEO, a man named Bryce who had been conspicuously silent for the entire ordeal, to emerge from his crystal palace and speak to the people. Bryce didn't agree to an interview with a hard-hitting investigative journalist. Of course not. He appeared on a friendly late-afternoon business show, the kind where the host calls every guest by their first name and the questions are softballs, lobbed with a gentle underhand throw. Bryce sat down in a leather armchair, wearing an impeccably tailored blazer over $1,000 plain gray t-shirt. He radiated an aura of calm, disruptive genius. He was here to patiently explain to the world why they were all wrong. The host started gently. Bryce, it's been a tough week for Innovate Solutions. What's your response to the intense public backlash? Bryce leaned forward, his face a mask of pained sincerity. Honestly, Maria, it's been deeply saddening to see our mission, which has always been about empowering human potential, so fundamentally mischaracterized. It's been a challenge, but it's also a learning opportunity. The narrator in me wants to scream, a learning opportunity. You learn that people don't like it when you time their bathroom trips. Groundbreaking stuff. Bryce, the host, pressed, ever so gently, on the specifics. A lot of the criticism has focused on the granular level of monitoring, the keystroke tracking, the inactivity timers, even the so-called bio-break data. Can you understand why that feels, to many, like an invasion of privacy? Bryce smiled a patient, knowing smile. This was the question he was waiting for. This was his chance to pivot from the grubby details to the grand, sweeping vision. I can, he said, nodding sagely. And I think that's because people are looking at the individual pixels, not the beautiful painting we are trying to create. This was never, ever about monitoring an individual's bathroom breaks. To even suggest that is to miss the point entirely. This is about understanding the organization as a single, living organism, a living organism. The total synergy subreddit, which was watching the interview with the intensity of a moon landing, immediately exploded with memes of their office building as a giant, pulsating amoeba. Bryce continued, his visionary fervor growing. It's about seeing where the energy is flowing. Where are the blockages? Where is the friction? You can't heal the organism if you can't see it. This data provides a diagnostic tool of unprecedented power. It allows us to build a truly responsive, healthy, and efficient workplace. And then, the host asked the money question. But what about the culture? Bryce, your own employees seem to be in open revolt. How can a culture of trust exist under this kind of surveillance? Bryce didn't even blink. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes shining with the light of a true believer, and delivered the single most delusional statement of the entire scandal. Cause, in a final, desperate PR gambit, the company's reclusive CEO agreed to a high-profile television interview to personally defend his company's vision. Effect, the CEO, utterly insulated from reality, gave a disastrous interview where he claimed, with complete conviction, that his invasive surveillance software had actually improved company culture by fostering a new era of data-driven transparency and removing subjectivity. Consequence, the CEO's out-of-touch and frankly bizarre pronouncements went viral, turning him into a public laughingstock and the personification of the out-of-touch tech founder. He didn't just fail to fix the problem, he became the scandal's public face. That's the most exciting part, Maria, he said, his voice brimming with passion. What we've actually seen, contrary to the narrative, is a profound improvement in our company culture. By providing everyone from the junior associate to the team lead with access to the same objective data, we've fostered a new era of radical, data-driven transparency. It removes subjectivity and bias from performance reviews. It creates a true meritocracy where the data speaks for itself. It actually brings our teams closer together through a shared objective understanding of our collective workflow. The silence in 1,000 employee living rooms was deafening. He thought this was improving the culture. He thought the mouse jigglers and the fake positivity and the bathroom break shaming were fostering transparency. The man wasn't just lying, he was living in a completely different reality. A reality where his living organism of a company was riddled with the cancer of mistrust. He had personally injected into it. The interview was a catastrophe of epic proportions. The clips were everywhere within minutes. Bryce, the visionary CEO, had single-handedly poured gasoline on the fire, danced around it, and called it a team-building exercise. He had looked the world in the eye and revealed that he wasn't just the architect of the digital prison, he was its proudest, most deluded inmate. CEO Bryce's televised monologue on the cultural benefits of digital shackles was not the masterful act of narrative jujitsu he had imagined, it was a public self-immolation. He had not only failed to redeem his company, he had turned it into a global caricature of everything people feared about the future of work. The name Innovate Solutions was now radioactive, and in the hyper-competitive shark tank of enterprise software, the smell of blood in the water travels fast. While Innovate was busy trying to scrub embarrassing memes from the internet, its competitors were busy calling emergency meetings in their marketing departments. For years, they had all been in the same gray, feature-focused arms race. Who had better AI? Who had smoother integrations? Who had a prettier user interface? Suddenly, Bryce had handed them a new, devastatingly powerful angle. They weren't just selling software anymore, they were selling absolution. They were selling the one thing Innovate Solutions had publicly and spectacularly lit on fire: trust. The counterattack was swift and merciless. It came from all sides. First, there was the established blue-chip behemoth of the industry, a company we'll call Omnicorp. Omnicorp's brand was built on stability and predictability. They didn't need to be edgy. They just needed to be the opposite of Innovate Solutions. Their new ad campaign was a masterclass in quiet, devastating shade. Full-page ads appeared in business journals. The ads were mostly white space. At the top, in a simple, elegant font, it said, "Trust is the ultimate productivity tool." At the bottom was the Omnicorp logo. That was it. No mention of Synergiza Pro. They didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who they were talking to. Then came the scrappy, venture capital-fueled upstart, a company called Flow. Flow's whole brand was built around being human-centric and intuitive. They saw the Innovate scandal as the marketing opportunity of a lifetime. They immediately launched a series of bright, cheerful digital ad campaigns. The videos featured shots of people actually collaborating, laughing in a meeting room, sketching on a whiteboard, taking a walk outside to discuss an idea. The tagline was a direct punch to Innovate Solar Plexus: measure what matters, not what moves. They published a blog post titled Our Privacy Promise, which explicitly stated, "We will never track your keystrokes, monitor your screen, or time your coffee breaks. Because that's creepy. And it doesn't work." Even the smaller, niche players got in on the action, using humor as a weapon. A small project management tool ran a targeted social media campaign with an ad that simply said, "Our software helps you manage your projects, not your bladder. Switch today and get 3 months free." It was a feeding frenzy. The entire industry seemed to unite in a collective effort to dance on Innovate Solutions' grave. This marketing blitz created a powerful feedback loop. Cause, the public implosion of Innovate Solutions created a massive market opening for a product that could credibly claim to be the anti-Synergiza Pro effect. Competitors, smelling blood, immediately launched a slew of aggressive marketing campaigns championing themselves as privacy first and human-centric, explicitly or implicitly contrasting themselves with the now toxic Innovate brand. Consequence: the abstract public relations crisis began to crystallize into a concrete financial disaster for Innovate. Potential clients fled to these competitors, and existing customers began actively looking for an exit strategy, threatening Innovate's revenue and market share. The impact inside Innovate Solutions was catastrophic. Their sales team, who just a month ago were closing deals by promising godlike visibility to executives, were now getting laughed out of meetings. Prospective clients were canceling demos. Worse, current clients, the ones locked into those multi-year contracts, were suddenly having their legal teams scour the fine print, looking for exit clauses. The question on every customer's mind was the same: are you really going to make us keep using the creepy bathroom tracker software? The CEO's interview, meant to project strength and vision, had served as the ultimate sales pitch for every other company in the market. He had perfectly articulated a vision of work that was so repulsive, so out of touch, that it made literally any other option seem like a utopian paradise. He hadn't just damaged his own brand. He had single-handedly legitimized the core marketing message of all his rivals. Innovate Solutions was now completely surrounded. The public was against them. Their own employees were actively sabotaging their product from the inside, and now their competitors were circling, picking off their customers one by one, promising them a safe harbor from the dystopian surveillance storm that Innovate had unleashed. The invisible hand of the market, it turned out, was getting ready to slap them into oblivion. For a while, the chaos surrounding Innovate Solutions was contained to the messy, unpredictable worlds of public opinion and employee morale, but in the cold, rational world of high finance, the company was still a star. Their stock ticker, $INV, had been a rocket ship. Wall Street analysts loved them. They used phrases like pioneers in human capital analytics and praised their aggressive data monetization strategies. Spying on your employees, it turns out, has a fantastic ROI. The initial bad press caused a minor dip, but the market largely shrugged it off. Tech companies have scandals all the time. As long as the revenue charts kept going up and to the right, who cared? Then came CEO Bryce's interview, then came the competitor feeding frenzy. And the institutional investors, the massive hedge funds and pension plans that owned huge chunks of the company, started to get nervous. The narrative was shifting. This wasn't just a contained PR fire anymore. It was starting to look like a fundamental threat to the business. The first sign of trouble came from the analyst reports. The same people who had praised Innovate a month ago were now issuing cautious, hedged updates. We are adjusting our outlook on $INV to hold due to significant reputational headwinds, one report read. Another noted the potential for increased customer churn and a challenging sales environment moving forward. The stock began to bleed, not a dramatic crash, but a slow, steady drain as nervous investors trimmed their positions. The company's market capitalization, the big, flashy number that Bryce probably had on a monitor in his office, shed a few $billion. The board of directors started making concerned phone calls, but the real panic, the moment the slow bleed turned into a full-blown arterial hemorrhage, was triggered by a single tweet. It came from a well-connected political journalist in Washington, D.C. with 1 million followers. It was short, cryptic, and utterly devastating. As COOP, sources say regulators at both the FTC and the Department of Labor are making preliminary inquiries into labor practices and potential deceptive marketing at software firm Innovate Solutions. $INV. The tweet didn't say investigation, it said preliminary inquiries, but in the hyper-caffeinated, paranoid world of the stock market, the distinction was irrelevant. The word was out. The federal government was now sniffing around. This was the tipping point. Caused the relentless bad press, coupled with the CEO's disastrous performance and credible rumors of a federal regulatory inquiry, transformed the scandal from an ethical issue into a significant, unquantifiable financial risk. Effect: the fear of government regulation, potential fines, and protracted legal battles caused Wall Street to panic. Analysts issued downgrades and investors initiated a massive sell-off, causing the company's stock price to collapse. Consequence: the collapsing stock price vaporized billions of dollars in shareholder value. This financial catastrophe finally forced the company's board of directors to intervene, shifting the pressure on the CEO from an external PR problem to an urgent internal crisis that threatened his own job. The market's reaction was brutal and instantaneous. The $INV stock chart, which had been gently sloping downwards, suddenly fell off a cliff. It was a red waterfall on the trading screens, a catastrophic nosedive. High-frequency trading algorithms, programmed to sell on keywords like investigation and FTC, kicked in and amplified the sell-off. Billions more in value were wiped out in a matter of hours, and here we see the beautiful, soul-crushing hypocrisy of Wall Street in its purest form. The investors didn't sell because they had suddenly developed a conscience about employee surveillance. They didn't care about the ethics of timing bathroom breaks. They had loved the company's ruthless efficiency when it was padding the bottom line. They sold because the company's methods had finally become a risk. The same investors who had cheered for optimization were now terrified of regulation. The threat of government fines, class action lawsuits, and a lengthy, expensive legal battle was infinitely scarier to them than 1,000 think pieces about dystopian workplaces. The phone lines to the board members' offices were now melting. They were getting calls from furious fund managers who were watching their investment in Innovate Solutions turn to ash. The board, which had been content to let Bryce handle the PR stuff, was now facing a crisis that threatened their own portfolios and reputations. They could ignore angry tweets, They could ignore disgruntled employees. They could not, under any circumstances, ignore a stock price that was in absolute freefall. That afternoon, an emergency meeting of the board of directors was called. CEO Bryce, who was probably still admiring his data-driven transparency talking points, was summoned. He was no longer going to be talking to a friendly TV host. He was about to face a room full of very rich, very powerful, and suddenly very, very angry people. The consequences had finally arrived in the only language the C-suite truly understands: the language of money. The emergency board meeting was not a discussion, it was a reckoning. CEO Bryce walked in expecting to deliver another rousing speech about his grand vision. He walked out, metaphorically speaking, with his blazer tattered and his visionary ego bruised. The message from the board was brutally simple and delivered without pleasantries. The stock price was in the toilet, the brand was a joke, and the words federal inquiry were giving them all-night sweats. The grand experiment was over. They ordered him to fix it, not with another interview, not with another empty statement, but with concrete, market-pleasing action. Bryce and his terrified executive team scurried back to the war room. The situation was dire. They had to capitulate, but they could not, under any circumstances, be seen to be surrendering, admitting that their entire product philosophy was a catastrophic, dehumanizing failure was not an option. That would validate the critics, empower the employee rebellion, and be Exhibit A in a dozen future lawsuits. So, they chose the only path available to a cornered, arrogant corporation, a full-scale retreat disguised as a bold leap forward. A few days later, a new announcement appeared on the Innovate Solutions blog. The tone was dramatically different. Gone was the pained sincerity of the non-apology and the smug condescension of the legal defense. This was a crisp, professional, forward-looking product update. The title was a masterclass in spin, the next evolution, announcing a smarter, more collaborative Synergies Pro. The post began by talking about the dynamic nature of the modern workplace. It was full of optimistic jargon about the future of work and new paradigms of collaboration. And then it got to the meat. It announced that, after extensive consultation with industry leaders and valued customers, the company would be making some changes. They were not removing features because of the global firestorm of outrage. Oh no, they were strategically deprecating certain legacy functionalities. Deprecation, it's a soft, sterile, technical term. It's what engineers say when they phase out an old piece of code. It implies a calm, rational, pre-planned process. It has the linguistic equivalent of putting on a lab coat to announce that you're running away from a bear. What, precisely, was being deprecated for the sake of this glorious new evolution? Funny you should ask. The real-time, user-specific productivity score. With its reliance on keystroke and mouse tracking, they were now pivoting to anonymized, aggregated team-level performance indicators. The intrusive "are you still there?" an activity timer. This was being replaced by a smarter, less intrusive system to help users manage their own focus. The granular analytics dashboards that allowed managers to drill down into individual activity, including the data that powered the infamous bio break report. This was being retired in favor of holistic, privacy-centric organizational health metrics. The entire announcement was an exercise in shameless revisionist history. Cause, the board of directors, panicked by the collapsing stock price and the threat of regulation, ordered the executive team to make immediate, tangible changes to the product to stop the financial bleeding. Effect, the company announced a major feature update, cynically using the term strategic deprecation to describe the removal of all its most controversial surveillance tools. They framed this panic U-turn as a visionary, planned evolution of their product strategy. Consequence, this cowardly retreat, while somewhat effective in calming the market and the media, was seen by employees as a profoundly dishonest act. It confirmed that the company would only change when forced by financial pressure, not ethical concerns, cementing a culture of deep and permanent distrust. Let's translate this final masterpiece of corporate spin. We are strategically deprecating legacy functionalities. Men, we are frantically turning off the features everyone hates before the government shuts us down. We've listened to our valued customers. Meant our largest clients threatened to cancel their multi-million-dollar contracts. The future is about team-level empowerment. Meant we've finally realized that spying on individual bathroom breaks is, in fact, a bad business model. On the Total Synergy subreddit, the announcement was met not with cheers, but with slow, cynical golf claps. They had won. The pop-ups would stop. The keyboard tracking was dead. The bathroom timer was gone. They had fought the beast and, through a combination of memes, mouse jigglers, and a timely leak, they had forced it to retreat. But no one was celebrating. They saw the announcement for exactly what it was, a surrender without an apology. A lie to the very end. The company wasn't sorry. It was just cornered. The update rolled out. The digital cattle prod was powered down. The unblinking eye was, for the moment, closed. A quiet, uneasy calm settled over the workforce. The most egregious tools of the productivity theater had been dismantled. But the stage was still standing. And everyone knew that a company built on a foundation of such profound distrust would surely find new, more subtle ways to watch them. The battle was over, but the war for their dignity felt like it was just beginning. The great feature deprecation of Synergiza Pro worked, at least on the surface. The stock price stopped its terrifying swan dive and stabilized at a new, considerably lower plateau. The media, having squeezed every last drop of outrage from the story, moved on to the next corporate dumpster fire. The competitors' attack ads felt a little less potent now that the most egregious features were gone. The board of directors breathed a collective sigh of relief. From the 30,000-foot view of the executive suite, the crisis had been managed. The storm had passed, but down on the ground. Inside the company itself, the storm hadn't passed at all. It had moved inland, settling into the very foundation of the corporate culture as a permanent, toxic fog. The company had removed the software features, but they had failed to remove the memory of them. And in doing so, they had created the ultimate, most delicious irony of this entire saga, the productivity paradox. The entire, multi-million-dollar surveillance system, the keyboard trackers, the inactivity timers, the bathroom reports had been purchased and installed for one reason and one reason only: to maximize productivity. The theory was that if you could measure and monitor every second of an employee's day, you could optimize it, making the company a more efficient, profitable machine. But now, with trust completely and irrevocably obliterated, the opposite was happening. The company was less productive than it had ever been. The first casualty was communication. The official Synergiza Pro chat, now supposedly safe, was a wasteland. It was used only for the most sterile, formal announcements, like a digital bulletin board. All genuine conversation, the quick questions, the collaborative brainstorming, the casual check-ins that are the lifeblood of any functioning team had vanished. It had all migrated to secret, unsanctioned channels, signal groups, WhatsApp threads, personal texts. This created massive information silos. Work slowed down because people were terrified to communicate on the official, recordable channels. The second casualty was discretionary effort. This is the magic ingredient in any successful company. It's the engineer who stays an extra hour to fix a bug because she cares about the product. It's the marketing manager who has a brilliant idea in the shower and rushes to write it down. It's the employee who goes above and beyond their job description not because they have to, but because they feel a sense of shared purpose. That was all gone. The new, unwritten rule of the employee handbook was, do your job, do it exactly as described, and log off at 5 p.m. on the dot. Why would anyone offer a single extra ounce of their energy or creativity to a company that had proven in the most spectacular way possible that it viewed them as a liability to be managed, not a partner to be trusted? And so, the paradox kicked in. Cause, the entire surveillance scandal, from the initial rollout to the final dishonest deprecation, had systematically destroyed the foundational element of a functional workplace: trust. Effect, in response, a deep and pervasive culture of cynicism and disengagement took hold. Employees retreated into silence, ceased all forms of voluntary, above and beyond effort, and began treating the company with the same suspicion it had shown them. Consequence, actual, measurable productivity, the very thing the surveillance was meant to enhance, plummeted. Projects stalled, innovation dried up, and the company became a sluggish, inefficient shell of its former self. A perfect testament to the fact that surveillance is a catastrophic and counterproductive motivator. The executives, of course, were baffled. They looked at their new, privacy-centric, aggregated, team-level dashboards, and the numbers were terrible. Project velocity was down. Team engagement metrics, the new, fuzzy ones that had replaced the hard data, were in the red, but they couldn't diagnose the disease because the disease was them. The disease was a fundamental lack of respect for their own people, and that wasn't a metric the new, evolved Synergiza Pro could measure. They blamed the slump on post-crisis organizational drag and market headwinds. They would never admit the truth. They had spent a fortune on a system to make people work harder, and in the process, they had broken their company's will to work at all. The productivity theater was closed. The actors had all gone home. The stage was empty. The company had successfully optimized itself into a state of profound and lasting inefficiency. It was a perfect, self-inflicted wound, a masterpiece of corporate self-sabotage. The quest to quantify the value of their employees had ended with the destruction of the very value they had been trying to measure. The company was now a ghost ship, adrift in a sea of its own making. The crew was mutinous and demoralized, productivity was dead, and the brand was a toxic shipwreck. But the official story, the one written by the lawyers and the PR department, was still technically intact. This was all just a series of regrettable missteps, an overzealous wellness initiative that had been poorly communicated. It was a story of incompetence, not malice. That last, flimsy shield was about to be obliterated by the one person who knew the truth better than anyone, the man who had helped build the weapon. His name was David Chen, and he was a former principal software architect at Innovate Solutions. He had been one of the lead engineers on the Synergiza Pro platform from its earliest days. He was not an anonymous source. He was a quiet, respected, and brilliant programmer who had resigned in protest months before the scandal broke, signing a thick non-disclosure agreement. On his way out, but watching the company's public campaign of lies. From Pat's gaslighting town hall to Bryce's delusional interview, had pushed him past his breaking point. He decided his ethical obligation to the truth was more important than his legal obligation. To a corrupt company, he contacted Maya, the journalist who had broken the original story, and agreed to go on the record. The resulting article was published under a headline that sent a final, fatal shudder through Innovate Solutions, the architect of the Panopticon. Ex-Innovate lead developer confirmed surveillance was the goal from day one. David's interview was not a speculative expose, it was a calm, detailed, and systematic demolition of every lie the company had told. He provided the receipts, not in the form of a leaked screenshot, but in the form of his own first-hand testimony as one of the system's creators. First, he eviscerated the wellness defense. The Wellness Hub was a joke. David stated flatly in the article, "We called it Project Make It Nice. It was a marketing framework we were ordered to build after the core data collection engine was already finished. The directive from the product team was, and I quote, find a way to make the creepy data look caring. We built a surveillance engine first, and then we gift-trapped it in the language of mental health. It was never about burnout, it was always about behavior monitoring." He described it as building a hammer and then being told to write marketing copy about its benefits as a therapeutic massage device. Next, he confirmed what the employees had suspected all along. The bugs were features. The screenshot pop-up, that was a feature from a module we internally codenamed Active Oversight. The original spec for that module was to have the notification be persistent, a constant reminder to employees that they were being watched, like a digital guard tower. The leadership team decided to disable that part for the public launch because they thought it was too aggressive for initial user adoption. The pop-ups that people saw were the less aggressive version accidentally being triggered. It wasn't a bug, it was a preview of a feature they fully intended to roll out later. And then, David delivered the final, chilling revelation. He talked about the future roadmap for Synergiza Pro, the features they were experimenting with in the lab before he left. Kaz, a former senior software architect, his conscience stirred by the company's persistent and dishonest public statements, decided to violate his NDA and provide an on-the-record interview. In the interview, he systematically dismantled the company's entire narrative, revealing that the wellness angle was a deliberate marketing lie, invented to cover for a pre-existing surveillance engine, and that the company had concrete plans for even more invasive monitoring in the future. Consequence, this credible, first-hand testimony from one of the system's own architects served as the definitive, irrefutable proof of the company's malicious intent. It erased their last shred of plausible deniability and cemented their legacy as a predatory and unethical organization. What the public saw was just version 1, David explained. We were actively prototyping a system that used a computer's webcam, with user consent of course. He added, his voice dripping with irony, to perform emotional analysis based on facial expressions during meetings. The goal was to create a real-time engagement score for managers. He also confirmed they were developing location tracking features for company-issued mobile devices to correlate physical movement with digital productivity. The plan was never to stop. The plan was always to go deeper, to monitor more, to quantify everything. David's testimony was the final nail in the coffin. It was the director's commentary on the horror movie everyone had just watched. It confirmed that this entire saga was not a story of good intentions gone awry. It was not a misunderstanding. It was the result of a deliberate, calculated, and deeply cynical corporate strategy to build and deploy the most comprehensive workplace surveillance tool on the market and to lie through their teeth about its true purpose at every single step. The article provided a grim vindication for the employees on our total synergy. They had been right all along. It wasn't paranoia, it was an accurate assessment of their reality. The architect of their digital prison had finally confessed, and the blueprints he revealed were even more terrifying than they had imagined. The whistleblower's on the record confession was the smoking gun. That finally caught the attention of an entity even more powerful and performative than a tech company's PR department. The United States government. The scandal had moved beyond the tech blogs and the stock market tickers. It was now a full-blown political issue. The vague rumors of preliminary inquiries solidified into a C-SPAN-worthy spectacle. The regulators, it turned out, were not just awake, they were holding a press conference. A bipartisan group of senators, smelling a populist issue that could play equally well to disillusioned workers on the left and anti-corporate libertarians on the right, announced the formation of a special subcommittee. Its purpose, to hold hearings on the alarming rise of digital workplace surveillance, a phenomenon they immediately started calling by its catchy, ominous nickname, Bossware. And the star witness, the poster child for the entire problem, was Innovate Solutions. The hearings were a masterpiece of political theater. You had senators who likely needed their aides to set up their Wi-Fi routers, now pontificating with grave seriousness on the ethics of keystroke logging and sentiment analysis. One elderly senator from a rural state, peering over his spectacles, held up a printed-out, heavily pixelated copy of the bio-break optimization report meme and declared, "In my home state, we believe in a hard day's work, but we also believe in a person's God-given right to privacy." Does that right end the moment an American clocks in for their shift? I think not. The sound bites were perfect. The outrage was palpable. Privacy advocates, labor union leaders, and tech ethicists were brought in to testify, and they painted a grim picture of a future where every employee was treated like a suspect. Synergy as a Pro was no longer just a piece of software. It was Exhibit A in a national trial about the future of work itself. Of course, the subcommittee formally invited CEO Bryce to testify. And of course, the company formally declined. They sent a junior lawyer to sit in the audience and take notes, while submitting a 300-page written testimony that was just a rehash of their legal EULA defense. This led to the glorious political spectacle of the empty chair. The committee chairman gestured dramatically to the vacant seat at the witness table. It seems the leadership of Innovate Solutions, a company so obsessed with the transparency of its workers, is not so fond of transparency when it comes to themselves. Their cowardice is noted by this committee, but as the public hearings played out for the cameras, a second, much quieter and more effective battle was being waged in the hallways and backrooms of Capitol Hill. Cause, the whistleblower's credible, on-the-record testimony provided the political cover and public momentum necessary for government, regulators, and politicians to take official action. Effect, a series of high-profile Senate hearings on Bossware were launched, turning Innovate Solutions into the public face of corporate surveillance and creating a serious political threat of new, restrictive federal regulations. Consequence, this threat of regulation immediately mobilized a powerful counteroffensive from the corporate world. A formidable army of lobbyists, funded by a coalition of tech companies and business interests, descended on Washington to water down, delay, or kill any proposed legislation, shifting the conflict into a long-term political trench war. The moment the senators started using the word regulation, the lobbying machine word to life, it wasn't just Innovate Solutions. It was a massive, unofficial coalition of every company that made, sold, or used some form of employee monitoring software. They saw this not as the deserved comeuppance of one bad actor, but as an existential threat to their entire industry. An army of people in expensive suits, armed with glossy folders full of talking points, descended upon congressional offices. They didn't talk about bathroom breaks. They talked about global competitiveness and the need for American companies to leverage data to maximize efficiency. They warned that any new regulations would stifle innovation and create an impossible compliance burden for small businesses. They framed surveillance not as an issue of privacy, but as an issue of national economic security. They sponsored lavish dinners. They made generous donations to re-election campaigns. So, while the senators were giving fiery speeches on the Senate floor for the evening news, the lobbyists were quietly in their offices, suggesting a few small changes to the wording of a proposed bill. A little loophole here, a vague, undefined term there, an amendment that would make the law unenforceable. This was the grim reality of the situation. The scandal had finally reached the highest levels of power, but those levels were a swamp of competing interests. The public got the catharsis of seeing a CEO's empty chair get yelled at, but the real decisions were being made over steak dinners, funded by the very industry that was supposed to be regulated. The future of workplace privacy wasn't going to be decided by what was right or wrong. It was going to be decided by who had the better funded lobbyist. The problem had officially become too big for one company to solve or to be punished for. It was now part of the system. While the politicians in Washington were busy holding performative hearings, and the lobbyists were busy ensuring those hearings resulted in nothing, the one force that never sleeps was already hard at work. The market, the public disgrace of Innovate Solutions, had created a fascinating business problem. The demand from executives for employee monitoring software had not vanished. If anything, the chaos of the past few months had only intensified their desire for control and certainty. The problem wasn't the product, it was the branding. Innovate had made the fatal error of being too obvious, too cartoonishly evil. They had built a digital panopticon and painted it black. The market had now identified a massive opportunity for anyone who could build the same panopticon, but painted a soothing, friendly beige, and so the Hydra grew new heads. For every one company like Omnicorp that was genuinely selling a privacy-first alternative, 3 new startups emerged to sell a smarter, stealthier version of the original sin. They had watched the entire Synergies Pro saga unfold, taking meticulous notes not on what to avoid doing, but on what to avoid getting caught doing. They were the second wave, the Bossware 2.0, and they were infinitely more dangerous. The first new head was a company called Cognition AI. They didn't sell monitoring software, they sold workflow intelligence. They had learned that keystroke logging was a PR nightmare, so they didn't do that. Instead, their software logged application interaction events and document engagement duration. They didn't count how many times you typed. They just recorded that you had Microsoft Word open for 47 minutes and that your cursor was active in the document for 32 of those minutes. It was effectively the same data, but it sounded professional and technical, not petty and invasive. The second new head was a platform called TeamPulse. They had learned that timing bathroom breaks was a one-way ticket to viral infamy, so their software didn't do that. Instead, it used machine learning to perform work rhythm analysis. For the first 30 days, the AI would silently learn each employee's unique daily patterns when they took breaks, for how long, when they were most active. Then, after it had established a baseline, it would only flag anomalies to the manager. It wouldn't say, "Brenda was in the bathroom for 8 minutes." It would say, "Brenda's focus period to break time ratio deviated from her 30-day average by 0.5 standard deviations this afternoon." It was more subtle, more personalized, and infinitely harder to argue against. It was gaslighting as a service. The third, and perhaps most insidious head, was a company named Officio. Officio had learned that the most hated feature of Synergies Pro was the intrusive, employee-facing pop-up. The public shaming of the inactivity timer was a disaster. So, Officio's software was completely invisible to the employee. It ran silently in the background, collecting all the same data: the application usage, the activity patterns, the sentiment analysis on their chats. But it never showed the employee a thing. There were no pop-ups, no leaderboards, no weekly reports. All the data was fed into a private, manager-only dashboard. The surveillance was a one-way mirror. The employee would never even know they were being judged until their manager brought it up in their performance review. This was the grim, inevitable evolution. The spectacular failure of Innovate Solutions demonstrated a clear market demand for surveillance tools that were less publicly toxic and more legally defensible. Effect: a new generation of smarter bossware companies emerged. They copied the core surveillance functions of Synergies Pro, but concealed them behind sophisticated marketing jargon and subtler, often employee-invisible methods of data collection. Consequence: the problem of workplace surveillance was not solved. It metastasized. The industry as a whole evolved into something more insidious. The new tools were harder to detect, harder to criticize, and harder to fight, proving that the only lesson the market learned from the scandal was how to build a better, stealthier prison. These new companies had perfected the language. Their websites were filled with terms like ethical monitoring, transparent analytics, and data-driven coaching. They positioned themselves not as tools of control, but as AI-powered consultants that provided actionable insights to help managers become better leaders. They had learned the lesson of the Wellness Hub: if you're going to spy, make sure you sound like a therapist while you're doing it. The great, tragic irony was that the sacrifice of Innovate Solutions had paved the way for its own successors. By becoming such a perfect, public villain, they had provided a detailed roadmap for everyone else on exactly which landmines to avoid. The market, in its infinite and amoral wisdom, had responded not by rejecting the bad idea, but by iterating on it until it was palatable. The Hydra hadn't been slain, the public shaming had just been a painful, fiery haircut. And the new heads that grew back were smarter, sharper, and knew exactly how to avoid the blade. While the rest of the industry was busy iterating on Innovate Solutions' bad ideas, the original company was bleeding out. The brand was toxic, the stock was stagnant, morale was a statistical error, and the C-suite had become a revolving door. The board of directors, facing the grim reality that their once mighty cash cow was now a pariah, made the only decision a board in that position can make. They initiated Operation Rebrand and Forget. The first step in any good corporate cleansing is a ritual sacrifice. CEO Bryce, the man who had so confidently explained on national television how surveillance improves company culture, was unceremoniously fired. The press release was a work of art and corporate euphemism. It thanked him for his visionary leadership and his countless contributions, and announced he was leaving to pursue new opportunities. This, of course, was corporate speak for "we have ejected him from the building in a cannon and told him never to speak our name again." Bryce became the convenient scapegoat, the face of a problem the board was desperate to bury. With the sacrificial lamb dealt with, the board moved on to the next, more expensive step, hiring a ridiculously trendy branding agency. The verdict from the agency was swift and brutal. The names Innovate Solutions and Synergies Pro were radioactive. They were landfill. They had to be scrubbed from the face of the earth. And so, after months of workshops, focus groups, and multi-million-dollar invoices, the transformation was complete. Innovate Solutions died in its place. A new company was born, Lumina. The name was perfect in its meaningless, positive abstraction. It sounded like a wellness app or a brand of sustainable light bulbs. It was soft, clean, and utterly forgettable. The flagship product, Synergies Pro, was also euthanized. Its replacement was called Connect Flow. The name was a masterpiece of gentle collaboration. It didn't sound like it was going to monitor you. It sounded like it was going to help you have a pleasant, flowing conversation with your colleagues. The aggressive, corporate blue logo was replaced with a new one in a friendly pastel color palette, a soothing mint green and a gentle coral. The font was soft, rounded, and lowercase. The whole aesthetic was designed to look like a direct-to-consumer mattress company, not a disgraced surveillance empire. The relaunch was accompanied by a marketing blitz. The new Lumina website was filled with diverse, smiling people in bright, airy offices. The About Us page didn't mention data or analytics. It talked about building bridges of human connection in the digital workplace. They published a new manifesto, a document overflowing with phrases like radical empathy, psychological safety, and humanity-centric design. It was a masterclass in pretending you were just born yesterday, with no memory of the person you used to be. The entire scandal, the bathroom breaks, the global humiliation, it was all simply memory hold. This, right here, is the final, most cynical act in the corporate playbook. Cause, with its brand and products permanently tainted by the scandal, the company's only remaining path to survival was to completely erase its own identity. Effect, a classic rebrand and forget strategy was executed. The CEO was fired, the company was renamed Lumina, the software was renamed Connect Flow, and a massive marketing campaign was launched, complete with a pastel logo and a new mission statement centered on trust and empathy. Consequence, this superficial transformation was widely viewed by the industry and, most importantly, by its own employees as a transparent and cowardly attempt to evade accountability. It proved the company was only interested in rehabilitating its image, not reforming its actual culture, leaving the same rotten foundation beneath a new, friendly-looking facade. The narrator in me is just exhausted by the sheer, shameless audacity of it all. A rebrand isn't change, it's camouflage. It is a snake shedding its skin and hoping the world will forget it as still a snake. The board of directors hadn't changed. The underlying code of the software, minus the few features they'd been forced to deprecate, was the same. The fundamental belief system that had led to the disaster, the belief that employees are just numbers on a spreadsheet, was still there, humming away in the servers and in the executive boardroom. Inside the newly minted Lumina, nothing felt different. The employees got new email signatures and saw new logos on the walls, but the culture of fear and cynicism remained. The Total Synergy subreddit was now filled with posts mocking the new pastel logo and the empty corporate poetry of the new manifesto. To them, it was the ultimate insult. The company wasn't just refusing to apologize for what it had done, it was pretending it had never happened at all. The new, friendly face of Lumina stared out at the world from banner ads and sponsored LinkedIn posts, hoping against hope that the internet had the memory of a goldfish, but a new coat of paint. No matter how expensive or how soothingly pastel, can't hide the rot in the walls. So, Lumina, the pastel-colored ghost of Innovate Solutions, limped on, a shadow of its former self. The employee rebellion had won, the CEO was gone, the creepy features were deprecated, and the world had seemingly learned a valuable lesson about the evils of workplace surveillance. It was a victory of sorts. But as the dust settled and the tech industry moved on, a strange and unsettling new reality began to take shape. The Great Scandal, the story that was supposed to be the death knell for bossware, turned out to be its greatest catalyst. Innovate Solutions had not been a warning. It had been a beta test. They were the clumsy, loud, brutish first draft. They made all the stupid, obvious mistakes, and the entire industry had been taking notes. The key takeaway for the market was not don't spy on your employees. It was if you're going to spy on your employees, for God's sake, don't be so tacky about it. The scandal didn't kill the demand for surveillance. It merely refined the supply. And so we arrive at the new normal, the world after the great productivity theater. Welcome to the work-life prison. It's a much quieter, more pleasant-looking prison than the one Synergies Pro built. But it's a prison all the same. The bars are just invisible now. Workplace surveillance didn't go away. It went mainstream. It became a standard, boring, and utterly non-controversial feature in the big, respectable software suites. Microsoft, Google, Salesforce. They all quietly rolled out their own workplace analytics or team insights dashboards. These features were never sold as standalone products. They were just bundled in another line item in a massive enterprise package. Another feature to be enabled by a system administrator. The language was perfected. The clumsy, aggressive terms of the past were banished. No one said monitoring anymore. The new vocabulary was a masterclass in sanitized, abstract corporate speak. They sold process mining, which analyzed how employees moved between applications to identify workflow inefficiencies. They sold employee experience platforms, which used AI to analyze communications and survey data to generate a real-time engagement score. They sold digital collaboration analytics, which mapped who was talking to whom and how often. To identify potential knowledge silos, the methods were perfected. The crude keystroke counters and screen scrapers of Synergies Pro were replaced by more sophisticated and far more insidious techniques. The new systems didn't need to count your typing. They could just measure how long it took you to respond to an email and compare it to the team average. They didn't need to time your bathroom breaks. They could just use your corporate calendar and log in data to see how much unstructured time you had in your day and flag it as a potential underutilization of resources. The entire process became frictionless and invisible to the employee. The new bossware was a silent passenger. There were no pop-ups, no leaderboards, no public shaming. You, the employee, would likely never even know the extent to which your digital work life was being observed, logged, and analyzed. You would only see the results, the mysteriously data-driven feedback from your manager, the sudden corporate push for increased cross-functional communication, the uneasy feeling that your every digital move was contributing to a score you couldn't see. Based on rules you didn't know, this was the ultimate, paradoxical legacy of the whole affair. Cause, the public immolation of Innovate Solutions provided a perfect case study for the entire industry on how to implement surveillance without triggering a massive public backlash. Effect, as a result, the market standardized a new, subtler form of bossware. It was integrated into mainstream platforms, marketed with sanitized language, and made largely invisible to the end user. Consequence, the practice of workplace surveillance, far from being eradicated, became a normalized and accepted feature of modern corporate life. The scandal didn't free the prisoners. It just upgraded the prison to a minimum security facility where you couldn't see the fences. The fight against Synergies Pro had been a fight against a visible, tangible enemy. You could mock its pop-ups, you could fool its timers, but how do you fight a system you can't see? How do you rebel against an algorithm whose rules are a trade secret? The world that Innovate created was a noisy, frantic, ridiculous theater. The world that came after was much quieter. It was a library where a silent, invisible librarian was taking detailed notes on every book you opened and every page you turned. The scandal was over, but the surveillance had just begun. And so, we come to the end of our story, the final scene in the great productivity theater. We look around, searching for a moral, a lesson, a neat little bow to tie it all up. But the stage is empty, and the only thing left is the quiet, humming sound of a server in a data center, collecting a new, more subtle kind of information. What became of our players? Lumina, the company formerly known as Innovate Solutions, survived. They did not go bankrupt in a blaze of glory. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, No perp walk for CEO Bryce. They just faded. They became a second-tier player in the industry, a minor character in the world they once sought to dominate. Their new software, ConnectFlow, is a perfectly mediocre platform. They sell it to companies who are either too cheap to afford the big players or not savvy enough to Google their new CEO's previous place of employment. They are a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms, a permanent testament to the fact that you can survive almost any scandal as long as you have a good enough branding agency. The rebels of our total synergy, the heroes of our story, have mostly moved on. The subreddit is now a quiet archive, a digital museum of a legendary battle. The key players, the ones who organized the resistance and leaked the documents, left the company long ago. The victory was hollow. You can't force a company to trust you. And working in that toxic fog of cynicism was unsustainable. They are now scattered across the tech world, working as engineers and managers at other companies. They are wiser, more skeptical, and are often the first to raise a red flag when a new workplace analytics feature is proposed. They are the veterans of a war nobody else remembers was even fought. And what about the lesson? Was there a lesson learned? This is perhaps the most cynical part of the whole affair. Everyone learned a lesson, but it was the wrong one. The board of Lumina learned that public, cartoonish surveillance is bad for the stock price. They didn't learn that it's unethical or dehumanizing. They learned that it's bad for business. Their lesson was about optics, not ethics. The tech industry learned that the market demand for control is bottomless, but they also learned that the execution has to be subtle. The legacy of Synergiza Pro wasn't a rejection of Bossware. It was a masterclass in how to build Bossware to 0.0. The lesson was, don't get caught, and if you do, make sure the user interface is so pleasant and the marketing language is so vague that no one can prove what you really doing. The regulators and politicians learned that holding a hearing about an evil tech company is a fantastic way to get on the evening news. They also learned that drafting, passing, and enforcing actual, meaningful regulation is a long, boring, and difficult process, especially when a legion of well-funded lobbyists is there to obstruct you at every turn. Their lesson was that the performance of oversight is often easier and more politically rewarding than the practice of it in the end. The only thing anyone really learned was how to hide the surveillance better. The fundamental disease, the obsession with quantifying human value, the profound distrust between management and labor, the belief that human beings are just inefficient machines that need to be optimized was never cured. It was just driven underground. The loud, clumsy, obvious monster was slain, and in its place, 1,000 quiet, invisible, and far more effective monsters were born. The illusion is that the problem was solved. The reality is that the problem just got a software update. And that is how a multi-million-dollar tech company proved that the best way to foster trust is to spy on your employees, get caught, lie about the lies, rebrand, and then watch as the entire industry copies your bad idea, but with a better marketing budget. It wasn't a morality play. It was just business as usual. So there you have it. The spectacular, absurd, and deeply infuriating saga of the great productivity theater. Now, a friendly reminder not to take any of this as financial, legal, or ethical advice. Though I think we can all agree it was a hell of a lot more interesting to listen to than a 90-page end-user license agreement. The truth is, these systems, these ideas, they're not going away. They're just getting quieter and smarter. The battle the employees at Innovate Solutions fought might be over, but the war over privacy, dignity, and what it means to be human in a digital workplace is just getting started. What's another modern mess you think needs the fact check, simplified treatment? Let us know in the comments. We're always looking for the next beautiful disaster. And that's how that whole mess went down. Until next time, don't trust the algorithm.